scripture reading this morning comes from Luke, the 10th chapter, verses 25 through 37. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this, and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to the place where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have." Which one of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." And Jesus said, "Go and do likewise." Mark and his family evacuated just before Hurricane Katrina made landfall on August 29, 2005. They learned through news reports and from contact with neighbors and friends that their entire neighborhood sat under 6 feet of water for 2 weeks. Mark could not bring himself to return even to look at their home. He knew there would be little, if anything, left to salvage. Now, by most measures, Mark and his family were fairly successful and stable. Mark himself has a PhD and is the head of his department at a local university. Yet the wrath of Katrina left them immobilized. 10 months after the storm, Mark learned through a co-worker named Shannon that her church was helping gut homes. In fact, Grace Disciples of Christ Church had been hosting volunteers nearly non-stop since just after Katrina tore through the Gulf Coast. Shannon assured Mark that volunteers at the church would help. That promise finally gave Mark the strength he needed to return to his home for the first time and begin the process of sorting through the debris. When the volunteers arrived, Mark was waiting for them. They spent the next 3 days gutting his home. First, they carried all of his family's belongings outside to the curb. Then they tore up the carpet, knocked out the mold-covered walls, and pulled down the ceilings, piling all of that debris outside. In the end, nothing was left but bare floors, studs, and rafters. The home was an empty shell, and it was just what this family needed. Shannon was on vacation that week and the next, but the afternoon that she returned, Mark was pacing outside her office door. "Thank you for helping us," he said, "but I have to say, I don't understand. I'm not a Christian. Why would they help me? They don't even know me." What he didn't know was that in the year after the hurricane, Disciples volunteers had gutted, cleaned, lived on the same property their entire lives. 90 years ago, Jean was born in the house that her father built, and Janet was born a few years later. In time, that house had to be torn down, and 2 new homes were built in its place, one for each of the sisters' growing families. When Katrina brought 5 feet of water into their neighborhood, it stayed just long enough to ruin everything they owned. Jean and Janet pooled their meager resources. Although each was living on fixed income, they managed to hire a contractor to start the repairs. That contractor took several $1,000s from them and disappeared. They pulled together another $2,000 to hire a second contractor, who also took off with their money. The day that I met Jean, a group of disciples volunteers was hanging sheetrock in both houses. She invited me into their trailer and shared some of their story. We had been warned. We had been robbed once, but that man sat right there. She pointed to the couch behind me. He was so polite. He seemed so honest. Jean and Janet had nothing left. And then they heard about a local interfaith organization, North Shore Disaster Recovery. Soon volunteers were coming from all over the country to help. Methodists, Presbyterian disciples, and more. They came week after week, and in 3 months, both homes were restored. Volunteers staying at Grace Disciples of Christ Church in Covington and at First Christian Church in Slidell have been working with the North Shore Interfaith since August of 2006. Week of Compassion dollars help support North Shore and purchase building materials for people like Jean and Janet. In the past 6 months, more than 30 families in the Slidell community had some part of their homes rebuilt by disciple volunteers. There are countless stories, countless moments